Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the presentation on the conference attended by myself. I'm Heather Day and Malik Yakini in Cameroon at the end of November of last year, hosted by the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. I'm really glad to have this opportunity to do a report back. Malik, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you for letting me introduce myself, Heather Day. My name is Malik Yakini, and as was said, I'm Executive Director and a co-founder of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. And for more than 50 years have been a Pan-Africanist and been very interested in the relationship between African descended people in the United States and the continent of Africa and the ways in which our destinies are politically tied. So when I got the invitation from Heather to attend the to attend the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa conference, I was overjoyed, and you'll hear more about the conference as we go through the report.
Great. So as was mentioned, I am the co-founder and director of Community Alliance for Global Justice. We came out of the protests against the World Trade Organization. So been around about over 20 years, and we're now dedicated to strengthening the global food sovereignty movement. We have a campaign called AGRA Watch, which was founded in 2006, that exposes the Gates Foundation's role in pushing a green revolution, chemically based industrial agriculture and onto the continent. And we're exposing AGRA, which is the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, or it changed its name. We'll get into that more later. And we're a co-founder and member of U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance, who's hosting this today. And we're also proud to be a member of AFSA, the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. Malik, do you want to share a little bit about where we were on the continent?
Sure. So the conference was in the capital, the political capital of Cameroon, Yaoundé. I traveled from Detroit to Paris to Yaoundé, and I think, Heather, you had a slightly different journey. You want to talk about that?
I traveled from Seattle to Paris to meet you. That was fun, getting to meet in the airport.
Yeah, we connected, and then we were on the same flight going to Cameroon.
Come on, folks, keep it going.
So I'll talk a bit about Cameroon itself. Cameroon, as all African nations, are really European constructs that were created as a result of European colonialism. The national boundaries often had little to do with the ethnicity of the people who lived within those boundaries, and often ethnicities were split by national boundaries, or sometimes ethnic groups that had tensions between them were included within the same national boundaries. Prior to colonialization, the area we now call Cameroon had a long history, and we have artifacts going back as far as 30,000 years when the Sao and the Baka people lived in the area. When Europeans came to West and Central Africa, first beginning with the Portuguese, they often renamed areas based on the resource that they were trying to extract from the area. So we had what they call the Gold Coast, what some Europeans call the Slave Coast, what some Europeans call the Pepper Coast, what some Europeans and now many Africans currently call Côte d'Ivoire, or the Ivory Coast. And the name Cameroon actually comes from the Portuguese term Rio do Camaros, or river of shrimp, because shrimp were in great abundance, and that was a resource that the Portuguese were interested in. The formal colonization of Cameroon began at the notorious Berlin Conference, which was held in 1884 and 85. You may be familiar with European history that in the years leading up to that conference, there were a number of wars and tensions between European powers over who would control what parts of Africa. And so at the Berlin Conference, Africa was carved up like a pie or a cake, and various European powers were designated as the authority in those areas. And so in 1884, formally Cameroon became a colony of Germany. However, when Germany was defeated in World War I, European World War I, the League of Nations gave control over the former German colony to the British and the French. The area closest to Nigeria was given to the British to control, and the rest of the country was given to the French. Formerly, they were called mandates. They didn't call them colonies, but essentially they were colonies. Next slide. Between 1960 and 61, what was formerly English Cameroon and what was formerly French Cameroon both achieved their independence, their political independence at least. I always have to make that distinction because most African countries, although they are politically independent, are still very much controlled by the former colonial powers. And so Paul Biya, who is the nation's second president, has been in power since 1982, and there's no signs that he's leaving anytime soon. Cameroon currently has more than 27 million people. About a quarter of the population are the Bamileke ethnic group, with 8 other ethnic groups comprising the other 75%. There's currently a civil war going on in Cameroon, mostly in the areas bordering Nigeria that are English speaking, who feel that they are not getting adequate representation or resources from the majority French speaking population. So in 2017, after some of their protests were met with violence from the government, several of the English speaking areas declared themselves independent of the government of Cameroon and have declared themselves the Federal Republic of Ambazonia. And you can even go to Facebook where they have a page and you can learn, at least from their perspective, what Ambazonia is. So we arrived in Cameroon. As Heather mentioned, we were on the same flight from Paris to Yaoundé. We arrived in Cameroon pretty late at night, went through customs and the protocols for COVID testing. And as we approached downtown, we saw this monument in the center of downtown, which is both in French and in English, given that it's a bilingual country, basically just says, I love my country, Cameroon.
And I love that it features a soccer ball. We were there during the World Cup, and one highlight for me that I'll always remember was getting to watch a World Cup game in which Cameroon beat Brazil, which is a big deal, with like hundreds and hundreds, thousands maybe of people outside. It was incredible.
And I think you're up, Heather.
So as we said, this conference was hosted by the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. I had the privilege of being at the second conference, which was in Senegal 4 years ago. And then the third one was virtual because of COVID, of course. And the theme this year was mobilizing African food policy and action for healthy food systems. For those who maybe are new to food sovereignty movement, food sovereignty is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and the right to define their own food and agriculture systems. So this is from the Declaration of Nyaleni, the first global forum on food sovereignty that was held in Mali, Africa in 2007. Our host was the Cameroonian organization called the National Concertation of Peasant Organizations. I believe it was founded in 2011 or 2001 rather. And we're really warmly hosted by the president, Elizabeth Atangana, who also was playing a big role with media and the various campaigns that were being, well, specifically the My Food is African campaign that was launched during the conference. But it was great. There was just a lot of members of the organization present, and everybody was so warm and welcoming and wanting to know what we thought of their country and telling us about different parts of it. And it was just, they were a wonderful host, and we got to see up close some of their really amazing work as well, which we'll share. AFSA was founded in 2011. It's considered the largest civil society organization on the continent. It brings together small-scale farmers, pastoralists, importantly. We don't talk enough about pastoralists, fishers, indigenous peoples, faith communities, consumers, women, and young people from across the continent. Represents 200 million people. And it's seeking the definitive, widespread, and irreversible transition to agroecology as a dominant food and farming system in Africa. The context of the conference is, I mean, quite impressive, all the work that AFSA is doing with a relatively, they currently have 12 or 13 staff, pretty small staff. Sorry about that typo, but in June coming in, the SEED working group of AFSA hosted a Pan-African conference, which we'll be talking more about their work, but they hosted 60 people, really successful conference. And then in November, they organized a delegation to the climate talks, the COP27 in Egypt, and really like had the most well-developed strategy up to this point on trying to intervene in the conference and trying to pressure the negotiators to represent the interests of small-scale farmers in, you know, providing solutions and how agroecology is a method for climate action, and really felt that they issued a statement at the end saying how small-scale farmers were really sidelined by the negotiations. And while there were some small advances, a lot of the language around what could be agroecology is couched as nature-based solutions, and that there was a presentation actually by one of the members who attended the COP and just saying how that narrative is dangerous and is not actually what we want. It's corporate led. Also, AFSA has been engaged in a campaign to defund AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. That's actually had quite a few successes. One of the founders of the Green Revolution, going back to the 60s, the Rockefeller Foundation, has committed to no longer supporting the Green Revolution in Africa. We're still working on pressuring the Gates Foundation. We founded that campaign because we're based in Seattle, Washington. They don't seem to have really made any movement. But meanwhile, AGRA changed its name. They took out Green Revolution from their name. So now they're just to be known as AGRA, but we know that change doesn't really represent anything real on the ground. They're still very much pushing for a green revolution, although it's evolving what that means. And then another major campaign, and this doesn't by any means represent all of AFSA's work, but another major campaign in important context coming into the conference was AFSA's work developing for the first time an African food policy framework that they're trying to get adopted by the African Union. These are the working groups of AFSA. One focused on climate action, the SEED working group, and land and agroecology. And just the focus of the conference, a lot of it was on nutrition and healthy food systems, and it was a very strategic moment for that. The Gates Foundation announced $1 billion for nutrition funding at the UN Food Systems Summit. That was sort of their signature, big announcement at that conference that was very problematic just over a year ago, the end of 2020, that a lot of us organized together to counter, and that funding is over the next 5 years. But AFSA is developing a narrative and also a campaign for funding for real solutions to hunger and nutritional issues. So just wanted to give some context about AFSA's work, and now I'll pass it over back to you, Malik, if you want to talk about some of the specifics about the conference.
Sure. So on the first day of the conference, attendees were asked to wear, quote, their traditional costume. And the photograph that you see is a woman from Togo and a man from Tanzania in their traditional dress. And I've shared with several people that it provided a dilemma for me, and I'll talk about that. Then also, I think Heather had a dilemma. But as a so-called African-American, of course, my question was, what is my traditional dress? And so I was weighing whether or not I should wear the tattered clothing of my enslaved ancestors, a zoot suit, or a hoodie and Timbs. And so I ended up wearing a dashiki from Ghana and some black jeans. But it was wonderful to see the incorporation of culture into the conference. And it was wonderful seeing people from 30 different African countries, 170 people, all representing their regions and their cultures. And many of them brought with them foods from their regions, which were on display at the conference. And let's go on to the next slide, Heather. These are some of the foods that were on display, and we won't go through all, but I'll just point out a couple things. In the lower right-hand corner, you see popped sorghum, which is not something that I had ever seen before. In fact, I think in the US, sorghum is primarily used as animal feed. In the lower left-hand corner, you see some roasted cowpeas, or cowpeas are similar to what we would call black-eyed peas in the United States. But there were many other food products that were made from traditional African grains, beans, and herbs that were on display at the conference. And we'll talk more about the My Food is African campaign. In fact, maybe we get into that now. There was a campaign launched at the conference called My Food is African in English, or Mange Africain in French, which was designed to promote the eating of traditional African foods by African people. One of the byproducts of the system of white supremacy and the legacy of colonialism and imperialism is that, one, power tends to be concentrated in the hands of wealthy whites, but two, the people who have been colonized tend to view the culture of those in which power has been concentrated as being somehow inherently better than themselves. And so that is true in many regards. We have the phenomena of many people in West Africa bleaching their skin because they believe that light skin is better than darker skin. We have the phenomena of many women throughout West Africa either artificially straightening their hair or wearing wigs to make their hair appear more like the texture of women from Europe. But the same is true with food, that if food comes from the United States or from Europe, there's this feeling often that somehow it is inherently better than foods that are from Africa. All that is of course, patently nonsense. And so the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa launched this campaign in order to assert that African food is not only good, but in many ways it's better for the climate in terms of the adaptation of those foods to the various conditions that we're seeing, but also in terms of the nutritional value. Heather, you want to talk about the book that was launched in conjunction with the campaign?
Yeah, I was just remember a lot of the speakers were putting into context the importance of this campaign. And one of them said that a study in the Lancet found that 9 out of 10 countries with the most nutritious diet are in Africa. Well, this gentleman is not related, but there was a book launch. AFSA's published several books, and there's an activist from Zimbabwe that created, I wish I had it here, I'm sorry I don't have it, but a popular education guide to the campaign, and gave a presentation on how it's a tool for engaging folks in conversation with lots of different exercises throughout it and information regarding the campaign. It was really impressive publication.
So this gentleman in the photo that you see, this is actually a video clip. I'm hoping we can show it, but his name is Nanfak, and he is from Cameroon. In fact, he's wearing something called, the fabric is called dupe, which is the traditional fabric from Cameroon, although this is a modern day knockoff of the traditional version. The traditional version was actually a woven fabric. This is now a print, which unfortunately is made in China. But he heads the Ta-Ankh Farm Cooperative, and they produce various types of value-added products. They grow various types of vegetables, and they do seed saving and sell seeds. Do we have time to show this clip?
Okay, good morning. My name is Nanfak. I'm a CEO of Tang. Tang is a cooperative located in the Western Highland of Cameroon. We are engaged in sustainable agriculture, food and herb systems. We produce seeds and medicinal plants for different purposes. Like you can see here, we have a very large varieties of pigeon seeds coming from our different organic gardens in the Western Highland of Cameroon. We are especially situated in Minoan fisher. You have also, we produce yearly around more than 500 varieties of plants, including fruits, medicinal plants, leafy vegetables, root and tubers, and etc. And we process the large quantity of what we produce into manufactured products. This, for example, the honey is the natural honey, because we also do beekeeping in our different agroforestry systems. I have also strawberry juice. As well, that is strawberry seed. And from strawberry seed, we germinate and make strawberry seedlings. Those strawberry seeds we can either plant in our garden or sell to the local market. We also grow strawberries that we harvest to process into strawberry juice.
I'm going to stop it there just because of time. Thank you.
Okay, good morning.
So do you want to introduce the first day of the conference, Malik?
No, I think that's you, and I'm talking about the second day.
All right, so the first day, there were several speakers from the African Union, from the high-level panel of experts at the United Nations, and others that addressed topics such as the strategic direction to transform African food systems, why current mainstream food and nutrition security approaches are failing us, how healthy eating addresses the climate crisis. These are all themes that were addressed, and how healthy soils and indigenous seeds lead to healthy food and communities. And I had the pleasure of being part of a skit. They broke folks down into interest groups. There were pastoralists and women and farmers, indigenous communities, like all the different sectors of AFSA, and presented us with a question that we had to answer and then present it as a skit. And that's one thing. The Senegal conference 4 years ago was the most incredible conference I've ever been to. It was all facilitated through art. And this one just did a good job of integrating different creative ways of participating. And I greatly enjoyed being part of that skit with the women's group. So yeah, day one was mostly a series of presentations, and day two was the most participatory. It started out with an event where Cameroon's Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development presented in this room that I believe is at City Hall, as part of City Hall. Is that right, Malik? Along with the president of the Cameroonian organization and the president of AFSA, the coordinator of AFSA, Bilian Belay, and in a public event where there's media present, and there was a presentation outside of the My Food is African campaign. So it was quite important for AFSA to demonstrate that they're building relationships with governments and those in power, and the minister was very favorable towards supporting agroecology, which is really very impressive. It's not the case in all the countries. Did you want to add anything about that first part of our day?
No, I think we'll keep it moving.
Okay.
So after we left City Hall, we visited a city called Mefo, and we were greeted when we entered the city by the mayor, who read a proclamation, and also by drumming and dancing. And this was prior to visiting a vocational center that we'll talk about in just a minute that teaches agroecology to various folks in the area. So perhaps we can show just a few seconds of this video clip. I'm not sure what happened to the sound. Well, you can see the folks drumming even if you can't hear it.
You can't hear it?
No.
Well, that's strange. I'm sorry to hear that.
We'll keep it moving, no problem. So Log drums are very popular in Cameroon. You know, many people know the djembe drum from the Mali area, which has become kind of universally popular throughout the world. But you know, there weren't many djembes, I'll say that, in Cameroon, but the log drums seem to be the most popular, along with the balafons. So we visited the vocational center after we were greeted by the mayor and the drumming and dancing. And as we came in, we were greeted by more dancing from children. And that's the photo at the top picture. You see a photo of Heather enjoying herself at the vocational center. Several hands of bananas that were on display that they grow at the center. The lower left-hand corner, we see terrace gardening, which I'm always totally amazed by. Farming on flat land is hard enough, but doing it on the slopes of hills and mountains is incredibly difficult, and also requires a certain amount of engineering in terms of irrigation and water flow and things like that. The photo that you see my face in is an area where they were intercropping bananas and beans. And then the final photo is a photo of a fish pond where they're raising fish. They also raise chickens on the site. While we were touring, many of the participants at the conference had signed up in advance to prepare a traditional dish from their region. And so we have several folks in this picture representing Uganda, Kenya, Zimbabwe, and Senegal. And we have a short clip. Again, I don't know if we have time or if the video is going to work, but we have a short clip of Sister Bridget, who was from Uganda, who is a staff member of AFSA, talking about the dish that she's preparing. So still no sound, so I don't think this is going to work.
Yeah. What are you up to?
Oh, okay.
Did you hear it?
Yeah, the audio started. Let's try it again.
This is the Ugandan stall. Our food is out there cooking, about to get ready. Chicken, potatoes. We are going to prepare the sauce now. You need to see how we prepare it. In banana leaves and yeah, brown nuts. So in Uganda, we don't cook one food with a meal. The banana, sweet potatoes.
Oh, Heather, the audio is so bad. I think we should just bypass this. But she was talking about how in Uganda they use banana leaves to steam various things. And in this case, they were steaming meat and fish. And she also talked about how they prepare these one-pot dishes in Uganda. And one of the reasons for doing that is conservation of firewood. The photo at the top center is Sister Anne Maina, thank you, from Kenya, preparing a traditional Kenyan dish. Next to her, the photo on the right at the upper right, some more folks from Uganda. Below them is a sister from Senegal preparing the national dish of Senegal, chebujen. And then the lower center picture is the Ankara chef from Zimbabwe preparing a traditional, well, he actually does what he calls Zimbabwean fusion food. So he combines traditional food with elements of other cultures. And I am hoping, in fact, to bring him to Detroit sometime this spring. So I personally am vegan. I'm sure I probably was the only vegan at the conference. And when I've traveled in Africa in the past, I've had some difficulty in having a robust food options. But when we got back from the tour and all the food was ready, we had this wonderful Pan-African feast. And I had a plate full of food that was plant-based that I was able to eat. Those who ate meat and fish, they had numerous options as well. We were accompanied while we were eating dinner by a traditional storyteller who you see in the bottom photo, who was playing an instrument called an mbet, which is a type of harp that has 3 gourds that serve as resonators.
And we just want to add, for me, this was such a moving experience, partly because a lot of the women who are cooking were people that I've worked with. You know, Bridget came here in 2014 when we had our initial summit with African leaders, and Mina we're working very closely with, and there are all these women that I've known, you know, on Zoom calls or at conferences, and just to see them cooking their traditional dishes was incredible. It was such a privilege, and just the way we were doing it all outside, and it really made me reflect on like our organizing and how important it is to connect over food and cooking when we have that opportunity. So day 2 was really special, and then day 3 was great as well.
So on the third day of the conference, I had the sacred honor of being able to address the conference in a plenary session. And one of the reasons that I felt so honored is because I was the only Western Hemispheric African at the entire conference. There were 3 people who attended from the United States, myself, Heather, and Karubel, who lives in Dallas, but is from Ethiopia. And so, so I was the only, again, African descendant person born in the Western Hemisphere at the entire conference. So I felt that not only was it a tremendous privilege, but I had a tremendous responsibility. So my address and PowerPoint presentation was entitled Building Black Food Sovereignty, Linking Africa and the Diaspora. And part of what I did is affirm that the Pan-African idea, in fact, developed in the Western Hemisphere, primarily in the Caribbean, and that through folks from the Caribbean and the United States being in London and interacting with folks like Nnamdi Azikiwe, Jomo Kenyatta, Kwame Nkrumah, influence those future African heads of state with the Pan-African idea. And so that as we continue to develop Africa and build food sovereignty in Africa, it's important that we hold high the banner of Pan-Africanism. And then we ended the conference on the third day with the panel, and this is the closing panel that you see the picture of at the bottom of this page, and this is several of the key players in AFSA who helped to organize the conference, and they kind of summarized the discussions that took place and the resolutions that came out of the conference.
And another highlight for myself was just organizing a screening during a break of the short film series Rich Appetites that AGRA Watch co-produced with AFSA over the past year. There wasn't time during the conference, but they agreed to screen it during one of the breaks, which was really satisfying because we had just finished the 5th film, Agroecology in Action, and it was just wonderful to share it with members of AFSA.
So we're going to go through this quickly, and I'll say that for me, one of the most valuable parts of the conference was connecting with all of these different people from all over the African continent who are doing work very similar to the work that I'm involved with on a day-to-day basis here. And so I'm looking forward to these relationships blossoming in the future and finding more concrete ways that we link the struggle for food sovereignty in the US generally with the continent of Africa, but specifically that we link the Black food sovereignty movement in the US with the continent of Africa. So these are folks from a variety of places around the country, around the continent: Togo, Nigeria, Cameroon, Ethiopia, Kenya, Mali, Uganda, Chad. And so the continent of Africa was very well represented at this conference. One of the most significant, I think, connections that I made, which was not a new connection to Heather, is with Karubel Tadele, who is the communications officer for the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. And actually, the 3 of us, myself, Heather, and Karubel, were all on the same returning flight leaving Yaoundé, so we got a chance to hang in the airport for a while. But I think the relationship with him, the connection with him, is going to be significant, very significant in terms of linking the work that is being done in North America and the Caribbean by Black food sovereignty activists and the work that's happening on the continent.
And for me, it was incredibly special to get to meet Karubel in person because he is the person that has co-produced our short film series. So we've been working very closely together, and it's been absolutely wonderful. He's the most generous, thoughtful, amazing person to work with. And it was just even more so in person. And just the fact that he's in Dallas means that there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration. And when we do our film series launch on March 25th at Town Hall Seattle, we'll have a Kenyan activist with us, Daniel Maingi, but I would love to bring Kirubel as well. So I'm looking into that possibility. So we want to ask everyone to stay in touch. You can join AGRA Watch's campaign. We can get you connected in various ways to the work. But especially right now, we're asking folks to watch and share the short film series called Rich Appetites, How Big Philanthropy is Shaping the Future of Food in Africa. You can watch all 5 of the films, which are called The Foundation. One is on seed sovereignty, one is on money flows, one focuses on politics of science, and then agroecology in action. You can see all of them at richappetitesfilm.com. And if you're in Seattle, again, we're having an event at Town Hall on Saturday, March 25th in the evening. And this is a photo, Malik and I, with Marianne Bassi, who some of you may remember from our summit in 2014. Wonderful friend, wonderful times we had in Seattle. It was really special to see her again. So I think, well, finally, another way that folks here can be involved is we're having, as some of you probably know, this is a 2-part series. So we wanted to share about the Cameroon conference, and then share that we're collaborating with the Seed Working Group, and they're having a strategy meeting in March, and they're going to do a report back to us on Tuesday, March 21st. So you're all invited to join us again that day. We'll send out an email with the Zoom and time, but it's at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And the presenters will be the co-chair of the working group, Francis Davies, who's with the Zambia Alliance for Agroecology and Biodiversity, and Famara Diédhiou, who's Senegalese and with the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. And we're just really excited to have this potential collaboration. They're in the process of developing a continental-wide campaign on seed sovereignty, and recognize the role that the Gates Foundation specifically and AGRA are playing in undermining that work, and want to collaborate with the US. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up and just encourage people to ask questions, or can share comments if you'd like. I'll stop sharing. Thank you so much, Malik. And we have, good job. We have 15 minutes.
Yes. It might have been on one of Malik's videos, but somebody from South Africa was talking about how they have almost no non-GMO seeds available in their country. And I know Bill Gates has bought up, 280 million zillion, acres of farmland, and I'm sure is intending to do high-tech farming on it. Was there discussion at this conference about, that whole issue of protecting African farmers and African eaters from, this technological madness that is taking over agriculture?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the seed project that was just mentioned is related to that. There was very strong pushback throughout the conference against genetically modified seeds, and very strong endorsement of collecting and saving traditional seeds in order to build seed sovereignty. Heather, you want to add to that?
Yeah, just that the problem of philanthrocapitalism, of the power of institutions like the Gates Foundation was also directly addressed. Just in general, that the role of corporate power in agriculture is something that everybody's struggling with in their work, and that we need to find joint strategies for countering that, and uplift the work that is already being done across the continent to protect seeds and work on farmer-based seed systems. The Seed Working Group specifically is working to build this continental movement, as I said, and their second objective is to collect and generate evidence to make the case for peasant seed systems. That's the way they frame it.
Okay.
Yeah, and they've done 25 case studies in 11 different countries on things including quality assurance, climate change, resilience, productivity, and say their main challenges are having a presence in an international political bodies that are favoring agroecology and fighting against GMOs and other, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And Heather, briefly, can you just say how long that they've been doing this struggle around the seeds campaigns?
I'm sorry, I don't actually know when the Seed Working Group was founded in AFSA, but AFSA was founded in 2011. And I know it's been one of the pillars of the food sovereignty movement around the world, I think, since
Thank you. Yep. Are
Well,
there?
hello. Oh, okay, right.
Vanessa, go right ahead.
Okay.
Hello.
Well, I'm really honored to see this happening. My name is Vanessa, and I'm in Seattle currently working in an environmental nonprofit. So I'm into environmental work and recently getting a lot into food sovereignty as well. So it was interesting to hear that you left Seattle to go to Cameroon, Maria. I just want to say I'm really honored and appreciate the work you're doing back home. It needs people who recognize this cause, and we have a lot of things we're fighting right now. And I'm speaking for Cameroon, but also the West African, or well, the African continent at large has a lot they're dealing with. You have external powers coming in to exploit, but you also have dysfunctional systems as a result of corruption and just everyone going for their interests. So there are definitely a lot of things we're fighting, a lot of factors included. And I just want to say, hang on in there. And there's a lot of creation of a sense of heritage that is needed in the local people. And there's also the need to look out for people who might pose as people who are truly interested in the cause, but at the end of the day, they don't. So I'm just giving you a heads up on that. But otherwise, there's a lot to be done. And I'm really grateful that you're engaging this. I'd love to be a part of this eventually. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, our organization is based in Seattle, Vanessa, so I'll definitely reach out. And thank you for being here.
All right. Thank you.
Wonderful to hear your perspective.
Are there others who would like to share or who'd like to ask additional questions? We have a few more minutes.
Hey, this is Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
Nice to see you all. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you both for the report back. And Malik, I really loved hearing about the connections that you are making and, just being explicit about the connections across the diaspora, knowing how you've been doing such important work in Black communities in Detroit and on this hemisphere. So it's just super exciting and meaningful to hear from you about that. And yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, if you have any thoughts or reflections about ways to kind of keep building on those connections yourself and maybe potentially more broadly with other folks in the Black diaspora too.
Yeah,
and would love to, we could also talk about that more outside of this call, but.
Yeah, I certainly do have some thoughts about that. So one thing that I'll be doing for sure is continuing the International Black Food Sovereignty webinar series that I started last year. And I'm hoping to get several of the people who I met at the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa conference to be guests, so that folks who are engaging in that work here can become more familiar with what's happening on the continent, and we can find ways to more concretely link our work together. And then, of course, there's the kind of joint work that I think all people in the United States need to kind of lock hands and engage in, and that's trying to dismantle policies which are doing damage in Africa and to promote policies which are doing good. So folks in the Black food sovereignty movement need to engage in that. Folks who are involved in the U.S. food sovereignty movement generally need to engage in that. I think that's an area where we have common interest. We also, when I talked to Heather yesterday, we talked about perhaps organizing some exchanges and having African food sovereignty activists come here to the United States and vice versa. So that idea hasn't been developed, but I'll just say it's in the discussion phase.
That's
Yeah, I mean,
beautiful.
Specifically, right, is follow up when that was one of the main things we agreed to do when we had the summit in 2014, and we were able to organize one exchange of South Africans who came here, and then about 10 BIPOC folks who went to South Africa. So it would be, we've always wanted to do a follow-up exchange, and I'm really excited about starting to look at how to organize that. And another thing that came up for me at the conference was that it's almost been 10 years since that summit, and next year maybe is another time to try to gather leaders from the continent here and you know, do relationship building again and strategizing again in person, because it really, or of course we could organize folks here to go to one of these conferences or to have a strategy meeting on the continent as well. I see that Elizabeth has had your hand up for a moment. If you want to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this really exciting report on your experience and on what's going on in food sovereignty in Africa. And I loved the range of products that you showed us that are being made there. And it just gave me this kind of wild idea for organizing an economic development project of importing stuff from Africa and helping projects all over the United States at food co-ops, like the new one that's going to be happening in Detroit, have shared products that they could sell to help finance and keep afloat and expand both the movement and the fine nourishment that will result from eating those foods.
So Elizabeth, we are on the same page. And first I want to say greetings. I was in Gainesville, Florida last week visiting a farm. And of course somebody said, do you know Elizabeth Henderson? So your name and reputation is all over the place. So it's very good to see you. But yes, we're on exactly the same page. And part of what I'll be working on, perhaps we can collaborate on, is how we can import those products that make sense. Now, you know, we're balancing you know, our desire to have more localized food economies with, you know, importing foods and supporting economies in countries that have been intentionally underdeveloped. But I'm certain we can find that balance and that we can add value to producers on the African continent by importing some of those products here. Very good seeing you, Elizabeth. I want to also give a shout out to my brother Damon and to Demelda, who I see are on the line. They haven't asked a question yet, but I just want to say I see you're here, and very good seeing you. Hope all is well.
So I just wanted to let folks know that the USFSA International Relations Collective had agreed to follow this call with a brief check-in of the collective itself. So the idea was to start that at 4 o'clock. So we have a few more minutes for questions and comments around the presentation, which has been wonderful. And lots of work to follow up on. So just to let folks know that there will be a brief check-in of the collective after this call on this same Zoom line. So please, others, if you have comments and questions, feel free to address them to Malik and Heather.
I'd just like to thank you all for reporting these activities back to the community. You know, so often people go off to these international conferences and, you know, learn whatever they learn and do whatever they do, and we never hear anything about it. So I really just appreciate the fact that you all organized this opportunity for us to hear about the work that's being done and the roles that you all are trying to play.
Thank you.
Thank you. By the way,
I know how you feel. And it's hard. You absorb so much, there's so much learning. It's hard to figure out what to report back. But this conference, it was actually Wasn't hard. It was such a privilege to get to go with Malik. Learned so much from you as well. So just want to thank you for diving in, accepting the invitation just a few weeks before the conference. It was really exciting to get to go together.
Yeah, it was a blessing. By the way, Heather, my friend Chinyere has been to every country in Africa, every country in Asia, every country in Europe.
Not true. Never been to Asia at all. And I've only been to maybe a quarter of the African, maybe even less than a quarter of the African countries. But anyway, he likes to tease me.
Well, maybe I'll say while we have a lull in the action, I'll just express my gratitude to the U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance and to CAGJ for the invitation. And it was a short turnaround. I think I had about 3 weeks, but as it turned out, I was able to go. But it was a tremendously rewarding experience for me individually, but I'm hoping even more so that the impact it has on our movement work will be long lasting. So I am greatly appreciative of all of the folks who in some way made that trip possible. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just
Greetings.
say greetings. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, Malik mentioned my name, so I feel I need to speak up.
That's right. my brother Damon, how are you?
Yes, I'm good. I'm good. It's very, very good to see that you've made this journey across to the motherland and bringing back some information to share with us over here in the West, you know. And I really appreciate you and everything you're doing. You're planting seeds in our minds for the future. I see Africa as the future for us as African people in the West, you know. And I think it's great that you made this journey and you're here sharing it with people in the West. And I really appreciate everything you do. You know, you're planting new seeds in the minds of us all, you know.
Thank you.
So,
for those who don't know Damon, he's originally from Bermuda. I met him in Ithaca, and he's now living out on the left coast.
yeah. And there's a beautiful community of farmers here. You know, I have to send shout outs to Black Futures Farm and the Black Food Sovereignty Council and everything that's going on over here. It's beautiful what's going on all over the country. And I really appreciate Detroit. I can never forget my experiences in Detroit and what's going on at D-Town Farms. You're setting a great example for us all, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Love you always.
Love you too, brother.
Well, thank you, everybody. Just, I want to acknowledge that, you know, CAGJ has been collaborating on this campaign against the Gates Foundation for over 15 years, and we couldn't do it without being part of international networks like with National Family Farm Coalition and U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance and Grassroots International and White Hunger and IATP, and all of us working together really made great strides and seeing some real results this year. So just let's keep up the work, keep fighting for food sovereignty together, and we'll keep finding ways to connect with the African movement. Thank you for being here. Thank you, AGC, being here, Growing Culture. It's great to see you.
Thank you, everyone, for participating, and to the presenters, a special thank you, as Chinyere said, for bringing this back to us so that we can all share.
Thank you for hosting, Maria.
Oh, no problem. Okay, for those folks who do want to stay on for the International Relations Collective check-in, just so that we can figure out where we are and where we are in our work. Thank you, Chinyere. We are here. I'm going to stop the recording of this session because I'm not sure we want to record our little transition or business meeting, if that's okay.